Hey there, we are so thankful that you have made the choice to watch one of ACC's messages online. You know, as you are watching and diving into the truths that are being shared, we challenge you. You're sitting at your phone or your computer, hop on social media and be sure to use the hashtag YouBelongAtACC as God is teaching you different things during this message. But you know, we say you belong at ACC and we truly mean that, which means we would love to have you join us during one of our Sunday services at 8:30, 10 a.m. or 11:30 a.m. here at 710 Aquahart Road. So we would love to have you jump into this message, and we're believing God is going to do some awesome things in your life today.
Morning. Hey, before we dig in too far, I want to take a minute this morning just to pause. So I don't know if you guys heard or if you didn't hear yesterday. I don't know if you did or not, but there was a mass shooting in Odessa, Texas yesterday. 5 people killed, 21 injured, and that's where my brother lives. This is a very emotionally taxing day yesterday. He was texting me during the event. They were on lockdown at a trampoline park, which was right near the movie theater where they actually took the perpetrator down. And so he's safe and his family is safe. But their church, which is a larger church in that community, will now begin the process of helping people heal through what was a very devastating event yesterday. And the unfortunate part is that this has become commonplace in our country, and that this has become something that I fear for this generation of kids that are growing up. Instead of doing tornado warnings, they're doing active shooter drills instead. And I just fear for what is going to become. And I fear to send my children to school. And it's just one of those things. It's just very, I'm sure if you have kids that are going to school, are equally as terrified. And so I just want to take a minute this morning to not blow past that, or to not wait, act as though nothing happened. And not just because it's close to me, although it is, and my brother and his church are reeling with trying to figure out how to counsel and navigate through a very difficult tragedy. They are tethered to many in the community who were injured. The 17-month-old little girl that was injured was tethered to their community. She's in ICU, and so it's just one of those things where I think if we don't pause and take a minute to pray, that we'd be remiss in this moment. And if you don't pray, if that's not your thing, that's okay. Just take a moment of silence here to do that, and just pray for the church as they attempt to navigate how to counsel people through this. I told my brother last night I wish I had something to give you, some nuggets, some wisdom that you can share, and I have nothing. I don't know what you say, and I don't think you say anything. I think you just stand alongside people and love them well. So pray for the church, pray for him and their team and their church as they love on their community, and as that community heals from what is a deep tragedy out there. And so if you don't mind just opening the service with me, I'm going to spend about 30 seconds allowing you just kind of a moment of silence and to pray, to ask God to help them. My brother's name is Kenny, and his church is Crossroads Church out there. There's a ton of churches. Pray for all the churches in Odessa, Midland area as they deal through it and navigate a really difficult journey. So if you don't mind, I'm just taking 30 seconds here at the beginning of the service just to pray, and I'll close this out here in just a moment. God, we come before you this morning humbled. God, a lack of words, confused and frustrated by the state of our world. And it's in moments like this where we often ask the question, why? God, we know that you are good. We also know that sin distorts and is prevalent in this world. And Jesus, I ask, I beg, I plead that you would bring revival amongst the people in this world. That you would change hearts, change lives, change minds. And while we try to pinpoint a specific issue, we know that it can't be just one thing. At the end of the day, it's sin. And it shows itself in different ways. And we know that the only mode of victory comes through you. I pray for those who walk in fear, those who are affected by this tragedy, whether directly or indirectly. I do pray, God, that you would bring a sense of peace and comfort over their lives. And God, that you would work in a mighty way through Crossroads and through all the local churches. God, through the counselors, give them wisdom and understanding as they walk through a really difficult next few weeks. So God, we love you and we thank you for all that you've done, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. Amen. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Chris. I serve as the family pastor here at ACC. I'm excited today to wrap up this series we've called Being Human. We're going to talk this morning about regret. We all know what regret is. We know what it feels like. You have regrets. I have regrets. We all have regrets. So I just want to talk about it. And more specifically, how do we overcome that feeling of regret? How do we walk through that? What should our response be to it? We all have different forms of regrets. Maybe it's sitting down on the toilet and not looking to see if there's toilet paper there first, or that girl you didn't ask out, or that felt too real for a lot of you right here. We're going to hand out toilet paper rolls on the way out the door this morning. So whatever that regret might be, like we all have different levels of regret in our lives. I know for me, we went to Africa this summer for 2 weeks with our students, and there was a moment where we got to go to this place where you can pet baby lions, and baby is in quotes because really they're like this big and they can still eat you and stuff. And so we walk into this closed off cage and they shut the door behind you. And they're like, all right, go over there and just pet the lions. You're like, okay. And so at that moment, this happens. I go up there and this happens. Now look, I know you're like, oh, Chris, you're smiling. You love that. No, so I was, what not seen here, I peed my pants. Y'all, at that moment, that lion opens its mouth all the way. I can count every single tooth inside of that mouth of that lion. And I don't think I've ever been more terrified in my entire life. But I was just sitting there going, if I smile, maybe I don't look so much like dinner. The regret for me, I was thinking in that moment, like, I'm going to come back without an arm or face or something. And that's going to be my biggest regret in life, is that I decided petting a lion was acceptable in life. A lion, y'all. But I didn't. Obviously, all my limbs and such are intact. So it didn't end up being a regret. It was really cool. But some of us, though, have genuine regrets. I read a story a couple weeks ago. There's this lady in Iowa who got caught speeding. And they came behind this 1998 Buick Century. And they were going. The cops pulled up behind her. She ran through a red light. She pulls off into this shopping center. And the cops come up behind her, and then she speeds back off down the road. And then at the moment that the cops are chasing this lady, they get a call into the 911 center. And it's this lady named Rachel Thornburg, and she says, hello, my car has been stolen. It's a 1998 Buick Century gray. And the cops are like, we're chasing that car right now. We'll stop it. We'll get your car back. So they hang up. They eventually stop the car. They pull the driver out of the car. And it's none other than Rachel Thornburg. The same lady who had just placed a call saying, my car's been stolen. She was arrested. She was charged with speeding and eluding police and reckless driving and, of course, driving on a suspended license, because that's a good idea. That's a day in her life that she'll regret for a long time. We all have moments like that, and maybe it wasn't that severe, but there are all moments in our lives where we have regret. And what I want to do this morning is help us understand, how do we navigate it? And it's not just our own, right? We watch movies or see in culture. They're all talking about this idea of trying to go back and to fix what was broken, You watch movies like Groundhog Day or Back to the Future, or even kids' movies like Mickey Mouse's Once Upon a Christmas. They all deal with this idea of being able to repeat the day until you get it right. We all have this craving to be able to do everything right, to make the right choices, to do the right thing. We all wish that we could go back at some level and fix something, be it small or big. And so I want to talk this morning about what is the right response to that. Because I believe that the only way we find hope is through Jesus. But at the end of the day, what we have to do, and if you walk away with nothing else this morning, here's the idea I want you to walk away with. That we need to have a right response to regret. We need to build out what does a right response to regret look like. Because we're all going to have them the rest of our lives. And we have to decide how are we going to respond when those moments come. I think there are a couple types of regret that we're going to have in our lives, or that we have in our lives. The first one I would say is a regret of action, something that we've done. These are pretty easy to pinpoint. It's a thing that we've done, but I think I want to share kind of three stories from Scripture. So you don't have to necessarily turn. I'm going to throw them on the screen, but I want to share three stories in Scripture this morning that kind of give us an idea of these three forms of regret. The first one is this guy named David. David was a king. He lived in Israel. He was a king over Israel. He's considered to be one of the greatest kings, if not the greatest king that ever lived in Israel. But David had a blunder in his life. David had everything he could have ever wanted. He had a great wife and a great life, and yet he walked out on his rooftop and still wanted something different. And he walks out and he sees one of his best warriors' wives bathing and says, I want that. And so he did. She comes up, they sleep together, and the next thing you know, she's pregnant. So David says, you know what? I need to figure out a way to cover this sucker up. So what he does is he goes and gets Uriah, his warrior friend, he brings him back. He tells Uriah, go, be with your wife. Celebrate the great things you're doing. And Uriah says, why should I get to have the good things when my men are out there sacrificing their lives on my behalf? That's not fair. And he sleeps on the doorstep of his house. So he ends up going back out into battle, and David has him killed. He tells his men, send him to battle and pull everybody else back. Leave Uriah to fight on his own. Uriah is killed. Now that is a regret of action. I don't think any of us, hopefully, are sitting in that bucket this morning. I don't want to be your friend, if so. But here's the thing. How do you come back from that? I mean, David, in that moment, you got to think, like, that is a massive situation. So there's a prophet in the day that walks up to David and tells David, you've done wrong. Here's an illustration. This guy stole everything that this one guy had. What do you think about that? That guy should be put to death. That guy's you, David. Oh. And then he has what I would consider to be the right response to regret. If you ever read through Psalm 51 before, I want to encourage you to read the whole thing. I'm only going to read a chunk of it today. But Psalm 51 is David's response to this moment in his life. David's response to what just happened. And this is what he said. I want to read just a couple verses of Psalm 51. He says this in verse 8. He says, oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a loyal spirit within me. This is how we ought to respond when we have regrets. This is how we come to God. You see, the first response when we're responding to regret is to go before God and beg for forgiveness. Our first response should be to God first. And David's plea is an example to us of what that looks like. To the point where when David dies, David is considered to be a man after God's own heart. Doesn't mean he was perfect, by any stretch, obviously. But it means that he had this relationship, this connection with God because of his ability to beg for forgiveness. Are you and I doing the same thing? When we do these actions, we have these actions of regret, our first step should be asking for forgiveness of God. But it ought also be to ask forgiveness of the other person. And here's what I know to be true. For some of us, the actions that we have done will not allow that to happen. That person or persons that you have offended, They don't want anything to do with you anymore. I'm not telling you to go force that. Like, no, my pastor said I had to get your forgiveness. Come on. No, they don't want to talk to you. Move on. But it's that step towards restoration that matters. It's that step in acknowledging the action that you have done wrong that matters. So acknowledge it before God first, and then also to the other person. Let me tell you how this plays out in my own personal life. I have what my wife would call one of many flaws in my life. She's very kind to me. Is a short temper. I don't know if anybody else suffers from that, but I do a lot. And so my kids, as do all kids, get on my nerves every now and again, and I tend to say things or yell when I shouldn't. Just full transparency. Don't judge me for it. But here's the deal. There are those moments when my kids do something stupid that I'm like, and I yell and I say that thing. Sometimes kids deserve it. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe you're like, no, you should never yell at your kids. It's so whatever. It's fine. I grew up getting yelled at and I was fine. But here's the thing. Maybe I'm not. Maybe you'd say I'm not. But my kids, right, at some points, sure, you need to say, hey, this is clearly not okay. Don't ever do that again. There are also some moments where I raise my voice and I'm like, should have done that. And I had to go back to my 8-year-old or my 4-year-old and say, hey, Daddy screwed up. Oh, man, I should not have yelled at you like that. I'm so sorry. Like, that was not okay. And I want to ask you to forgive me. And, of course, like, kids have the memory of a goldfish. They're like, oh, we love you, Daddy. I didn't even know you yelled at me. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's fine. High fives all around. But it is important. Why? Because I'm setting the example for them of what they ought to do when they do something that is wrong. Because as a parent, right, you can always go like, because I said so, right? Like, just do what I tell you to. I can yell at you because I'm your parent. I do what I want. But I don't want my kids to ever grow up thinking they just get to do whatever they want to because they're older. They have to own the mistakes that they made, as do I. And so, sometimes when we do these regrettable actions, we have to take steps towards restoration. First to God, and equally to the person that we've offended. But I don't think that there's just one level. I think not just actions, but I equally think inaction you can have regret of inaction. And what I mean by that is things that we didn't do or things that we might have missed out on. There's this disciple in the New Testament by the name of Peter. This guy was one of Jesus' favorites. And I know maybe you're the parent in the room who's like, you're not supposed to have favorites. Yeah, you do. Just don't tell anybody. So Jesus had these 3 favorites, Peter, James, and John. And of these 3 guys, Peter was the most outspoken. He was a guy who spoke before he thought more often than not. And so Peter, at the Last Supper, he's sitting with Jesus. And Peter looks over to Jesus and he's like, man, I would die for you. And Jesus is like, cute. You're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows in the morning. Jesus is like, no way. Peter's like, come on, man. No, you're joking. And so Jesus gets arrested that night. They go down. He's standing trial before all these people. He's getting beaten by all of these people. He's getting mocked and made fun of. And people come up to Peter and they're like, hey, weren't you with him? Weren't you with that Jesus guy? 3 times this happens. And 3 times Peter says, nope, wasn't me. It wasn't me. I don't know who that is. And then the rooster crows. And Luke 22 gives us an insight as to how Peter felt in that moment. Check this out. Verse 61, it says, at that moment the Lord turned, check this out, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Could you imagine the amount of regret that you immediately feel? Can I just be honest with you for a second, just kind of as a sidebar? God sees and knows your actions and inactions and yet still loves you. Peter, he looks at Peter. Suddenly the Lord's words flash through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me. And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. Peter's regret is deserved and earned. He denied Jesus just like he said he wasn't going to do. But aren't we equally just as guilty of doing this? Aren't we just as guilty of walking into work or school or our families and not talking about Jesus? Like, our inaction is just as wrong as our action. And for some of us, we need to realize that our passivity is a regret in our lives. And that for Peter, it wasn't just his action of denial, it was this inaction of not claiming Christ. And a lot of us might have inactions that we regret. Maybe it's a game that you missed with your kids, or maybe it was something that you missed out on or failed to do. Like, whatever it was, Like all of us have these inactions that you can look back on and be like, man, I wish I would have done that differently. Or on the other side, on the inaction side, I wish that maybe I would have done that. Oh man, I wish I wouldn't have missed that. And we think we don't get to come back from it. But if you follow Peter's story to the end, on a beachfront, Jesus looks at Peter and restores him, not once, not twice, but 3 times. He says, Peter, I forgive you. Peter, I forgive you. Peter, I forgive you. Doesn't matter how many times our actions or inactions turn us from God. God is always there, ready to restore us into a right relationship with him. I'm reminded of a story when my son was 18 months old. We were out at a park one day, and we decided to go down the slide. He wanted me to go down the slide with him because, that's what dads do. You get up and you get to go down the slide. And so I put him on my lap, and we go down the slide, and my son on the way down sticks his foot out, tries to stop us from going down. So we just go over his leg and keep going. It's fine. We get to the bottom of the slide, and I'm like, buddy, okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. Wasn't crying, didn't act like anything was wrong. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I set him down on the ground, and he takes off. About less than a minute later, he walks back over to me. He's like, hey, Dad, my leg kind of hurts. Can we go home? I'm like, yeah, sure. So we go home. I don't think anything of it. We get home. We put some ice on it. I thought it was something like his ankle, like maybe he just twisted his ankle. But I grew up, I don't know, maybe you didn't grow up this way, but I grew up with parents who were like, you're fine, just walk it off. Like, my bone's out of it's fine. Like, there you go, back in. Come on, what do you need what are you waiting for, buddy? Go out there and keep running. It's cool. I don't know, love and affection weren't great in our house, so it's fine. My parents are going to be here. It's fine. They know it's true. So that's the way I just treated my son. In this moment, I'm like, buddy, just suck it up, dude. Come on, man. Keep walking. So he did for a day. We had a great nanny at the time that was keeping our son during the day while we were at work. And the first day, she was like, he was kind of favoring his leg, but he was okay. He was kind of crawling a little bit more than walking, but he's okay. And I was like, all right. So the next day, she calls us, and she's like, hey, I think something's wrong. Aiden's crawling, and he's dragging his leg behind him. And I'm like, oh, all right, yeah, that sounds serious. So we come home, and we take him to the doctor. Fun fact, Aiden broke his leg. 2 things, though. First of all, how hardcore is that dude that he was running on? I mean, come on. You know what I'm saying? Just saying, set the trajectory for manhood. Secondly, boy, that was a big regret of inaction on our behalf, and it really changed the trajectory of how we handle and deal with when our kids get hurt. For example, my son fell off a ladder this past week. We were on Stafford Street up in Pennsylvania and got a call from my wife saying, hey, Aiden fell 6 feet off a ladder and landed on his hip. He's favoring his hip. I'm like, take him to the hospital. It's fine. Just take him, get him looked at. He has a broken hip. You know what I mean? It's gonna look weird the rest of his life. So you should go get that looked at. So it shifts, it changes. Our actions and inactions ought to shift and change the way that we handle situations. We learn from them, we grow from them, but we do not live in them. We find freedom from them. And so not only are there regrets of actions, things we've done, or regrets of inactions, things that we wish we would have done or missed out on, but there are regrets of reaction. And I think this one is the one that hurts the most. Regrets of reaction are things that were either done to us or that we've done to somebody else. A reaction to a situation. An example of this would be a guy by the name of Job in the Old Testament. And Job was a guy who had everything. He loved God well. The book of Job actually tells us that he was a man that did really no wrong. Job was a great dude. He had a great life. He had everything you could ever want. And in a matter of a moment, everything was taken from him. Everything but his wife and his house. Everything else was gone. And it comes to the point where you hear Job speak for the first time in Job chapter 3. And let me just be honest with you, the way that Job reacts is not super positive. Job says this in Job 3. He says, let the day of my birth be erased, and the night I was conceived. Why wasn't I born dead? Why didn't I die as I came from the womb? Job's regret brought him to utter ruin. He had nothing left. And he had done nothing to deserve what had happened to him. Job was a man who loved God well, and loved his family well, and yet he still wished he wasn't alive. And let me just be real for a second. there are some things in our lives that drive us to the same point. There are some things in your life that you had no control over that were done to you that drive you to the point of wishing you weren't alive anymore. And I know that because I lived that. When I was 11 years old, one of my neighbors thought it was okay for him to take advantage of me in the same way. And I lived and suppressed that moment in my life for over a decade until I got to college, and it all came full circle. I sat in counseling for a year. And a society that tells us that men aren't allowed to share their feelings or the emotions or things, to just suppress it and get over it, let me just speak truth to you for a second. I found freedom in sharing my story. I found freedom in knowing that in speaking my truth, that I might be able to protect or stop somebody else from that same thing happening to them. And I found that for you and I, those of you that are afraid this morning to share your story for fear of what might happen or for the shame that might come with it, can I just tell you that there's a deep freedom that comes in sharing that story out loud. And I want to encourage you this morning to do that. If that's you, you're sitting in the room, I'm telling you, you will be liberated by not giving that person any more control over your life. And I want to speak that to you this morning because I know that it leads us to a dark place. The reaction that we have when things are done to us is that either we deserve it, that it should have been done to us. And I watch students walk through the doors of Remix saying, it's okay because I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have been there. Please stop carrying the shame and the guilt thinking that it was your fault. It wasn't. It was some other demented person's fault. And stop walking in that shame. For some of us this morning, it's not just a reaction to something that's been done to us, but it's also a reaction of maybe something that we have done to somebody else. And what I mean by that is we are reacting to a situation that's happened. So an example of this might be in college, we decided during finals week to prank our professor. And so we walked out and we got a bunch of stuff and we went to his house and we pranked his house. We threw water balloons and all sorts of stuff in his yard. It's fine. We did all of that and he came in the next morning and he was like, man, it sounded like gunshots were going on. I mean, it was just like, because he had that vinyl siding. It was amazing. So he said it was super loud, woke him up. It was awesome. So he comes up and he says, but on top of that, whoever decided it was funny to do this broke my window and broke my glass door, and I want somebody to pay for it. That's not okay. And so the 8 of us that had done it that last night got together and we're like, look, we shouldn't have broke anything. Like, it's not right. We need to go back in there. We need to make it right. We need to pay, for whatever was broken. So we walked back in and we're like, hey, Mike, it was us. So sorry. And, just let us know, what we need to pay and we'll take care of it. He's like, oh, nothing's broken. I just want to know who I need to get back. So life lesson, for those of you this morning who are prankers, always check the damage. Always go and check the scene of the crime before you confess to the crime. You know what I'm saying? Here's the deal. For some of us, our reactions are a little bit more serious than that, right? The things that we are reacting to are. But our reactions can cause real damage in people's lives. And so those regrets, those things equally need to be forgiven. And we have got to be able to have that right response of going before God and asking for Him to come forgive us, and then equally going back to the people that we have harmed and finding restoration in them as well. And I'm not saying if you do all of this, consequences will go away. Consequences are real. They don't disappear. So the hurt that might have been caused, maybe the rest of your life, the rest of their life in separation, that may not be restored, but understand that finding freedom from the guilt and the shame that comes alongside of these regrets is not found in holding it inside. It's found in speaking your truth. I want to close this morning with a passage in Isaiah I feel like kind of gives us a really good linchpin to end on. Isaiah 43. Isaiah is a prophet who's speaking to the people of Israel at the time, and he's telling about all these incredible things that God has done. Look at these great things that God has done. He freed us from this, and He's done this, and all this. And then he writes these words. God writes these words through Isaiah. He says, but forget all of that. Forget all the great things that you see. It is nothing compared to what I'm going to do. For I am about to do something new. See, I've already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers and dry wasteland. He says this line, right? But forget all that. Oh, I mean, he's telling Israel, hey, remember all those incredible heroes of the faith? Remember those guys like Abraham and Moses and David and Joshua? Remember all those incredible things I did, like freeing you from the bondage of the Egyptians or allowing you to walk through the waters on dry land, not once but twice? Remember when I walked you into the promised land? Remember all those things? Forget all that. Forget all of it. I'm starting something new, and not just new, better. He's not talking about like a better promised land. He's talking about the fact that Jesus, twofold, Jesus is coming, and it's way better than all those men that you're looking to now. And secondly, he's talking about heaven. That's going to be way better than the promised land you're living in now. See, God in this moment is creating a pattern of deliverance for these people leading all the way up to Jesus. He's saying, see how I'm going to deliver you from here and deliver you from here and deliver you from here? That's nothing compared to what I'm going to do in you. And so what do we see in that? I mean, here's what I know. At the end of this passage, he says this, right? He says, forget all that. But then at the end, he says, I'm going to create a pathway through the wilderness and rivers in the dry land. He's saying, where there's not a path forward, I got it. I'm going to make it. Where there's not a river, where there's not water, it's fine. I'm going to create it. Why? Because I am the one leading you. I'm the one carrying you to this future. So don't sit in your regret today. Don't sit in your failures and past mistakes today. Don't allow those to control you. Alexander Graham Bell, I love what he said. He said this quote, and I feel like it's just amazing. He said, when one door closes, another one opens. We often look so long and regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the one which has opened for us. What does that mean? That means that oftentimes we look at a door going, oh, I wish I would have. Oh, man, if only. Oh, man, I missed it. Oh, man, I can't believe I didn't do that right. Rather than seeing the better door sitting over here. And God's like, hey, over here. Hey, did you see me? See that? But you don't see this? You don't see this door yet. Okay, it's cool. Just gonna leave it open. Just walk on through. We look all the way over here like, man, look what I could have done. Look what I could have said. Look what I should have done. Instead of look what's been set out for you. I'm creating a pathway. I'm creating a walkway. I'm giving you rivers in dry wasteland. Here's what I've come to know to be true. That overcoming regret requires remembering that there is no condemnation for us in Christ. And what I've found to be true is that our greatest failure, our lowest point, that point of rock bottom, is often the precise time and place that God chooses to begin a work in you, a great work in you. It's that moment where we're at the lowest point of our lives that we oftentimes find the greatest sense of joy and peace and comfort. Do you know why that is? Because when you're at rock bottom, you can't cling to anything else. You have to reach up and hope that somebody will save you. And Jesus is looking at you going, yep, I got you. I'm here for you. You've tried to cling to everything else along the way rather than me. And now it's time to cling to me. And I just wonder this morning how many of us are clinging to everything else in our lives rather than clinging to Christ. So what do we do now? We have an opportunity, a moment this morning where you get to create change. See, we're in a battle every single day in our lives. A battle for our mind, a battle for our hearts, a battle that you and I have to fight every single day. And that battle can't be fought alone. So maybe this morning it's an opportunity for you to find a life group to join. Or maybe for you it's an opportunity for you to find a team to serve on here at ACC. What I tell the students is this. You can't do life alone. You have to have a team around you. This is why I feel like God created team sports. To help us remember that Peyton Manning can't win by himself. Tom Brady can't win by himself. Lamar Jackson can't win the Super Bowl this year by himself. Although we will win the Super Bowl this year. I want to be super clear about that. All right? Come on. All my Steelers fans, go home. But here's the thing. That is your one large regret, friends. Yeah, let me just speak to you no, I'm joking. No, it's a different message, different day. We have to find a team that's around us. a group of people who will come alongside of us and help us grow and challenge us. Because here's what I found. The battle for our regret is here. And if you ever lived in my brain for 1 second, I know it's not a good place to be in. And yours is probably no different. And so you and I have to have people speaking truth into our brains today. Not the past regrets that we're speaking of, the shame that we're living, but find freedom in truth and in nothing else. Zig Ziglar, I love this quote. He said it this way. He said, one of these days you will either say one of two things. I wish I had, or I'm glad I did. We can live our lives in one of those two buckets. We can live our lives saying, I wish I had, wish I'd done that, I wish I hadn't done that, wish I hadn't reacted like that. Or we can live our lives saying, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did. The only way we get to live in that second bucket is by finding freedom in who Jesus is and what he's done, by finding a team around us to speak truth, and finding freedom in sharing our story. So what do we do with that now? What's our what now? Here you go. It's 3 things. Number 1, seek freedom. Cling to Jesus. If you don't have a relationship with him, start there. Find freedom in the cross. Find freedom in clinging to Jesus and nothing else. Tell your story. I know it's hard. I've had to do it. But sharing your story negates the power that person, that story has over you. It gives you freedom and strength and power and liberates you from the bondage of regret. Share your story today. Or maybe you've done those 2 things. Maybe you feel alone. Find community. Join a team. Join a life group. Find people around you. Tap your neighbor and say, you're my new best friend. Whatever it is today, don't be passive. Don't say, nobody likes me around here. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of us in the room. Somebody will like you. Tap them on speed dating. Hey, what do you like? I don't like that. Hey, what do you like? I don't like that. Hey, what do you like? I like that. We're going to be best friends. Stop expecting everybody else to do the work for you. Just tap somebody. I'm an introvert. Then go find the other people standing in the corner and be like, hey, I don't want to talk either. And you've got your community. We're done. Like we're helping you find community. Here's what I know to be true. If you continue to define yourself by your regrets, you'll miss out on the freedom found in redemption. If you continue to define yourself by the regrets that you've done, you will miss out on the freedom found in redemption. Seek freedom, share your story, find community. Church, it's time for us to find freedom and liberation from the things that hold us in bondage. Will you pray with me? Jesus, thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to learn, to grow, to be challenged this morning. God, I pray over this group. I pray for each individual in this room, each man, each woman, each child, each student that sits in this room. God, help them to find freedom from the bondage that holds them back in regret. And Jesus, I ask that you would help them to see the incredible freedom that they can have by sharing their story, by finding community, and by, above all, clinging to you. Jesus, bring hope to us this morning. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Well, we are so thankful for the truth that was shared in this message today. Please know that we as a staff and as a church are praying that what you have learned today, the truths that God has put deep down into your heart, will manifest themselves and grow themselves into something amazing. And as always, you can experience that with other believers, other people who are walking this walk of faith at ACC on a Sunday morning at 8:30, 10 a.m., or 11:30 a.m. As a reminder, please remember, you belong at ACC.